Welcome to the Energy Talks, jointly organized by the Institute for Development and Diplomacy of IDD University and Nobel Energy, where we are having brief discussions about energy affairs with a particular focus on Azerbaijan and wider Caspian region. This session will discuss the role of innovation and technologies in sustainable energy solutions. In particular, we are going to learn how various stakeholders in Azerbaijan are trying to make their operations green and sustainable. Our guests today are Mr. Rashad Bayramov, advisor to the Minister of Digital Development and Transportation, Eugene Seah, Chief Operations Officer at Port of Baku, and Professor Damjan Mišković, Director of Policy Research and Analysis at IDD University. The talks will be moderated by me, Ahmad, a Senior Research Fellow at the Energy and Sustainable Development Program of the Institute for Development and Diplomacy of IDD University, and Mr. Turkhan Ahmadov, Head of PR and Communications at Nobel Energy. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
So, energy transition, as it is described, reducing the reliance on carbon-heavy systems and transitioning to lower carbon systems has already started. But it may not be as easy as it sounds, the process itself, the transition. I mean, because it requires certain changes in the technology. It's about moving away from using legacy technology towards more kind of innovative and advanced technology. So it's a tough process. Obviously, the role of technology in energy transition is very big. Mr. Bayramov, last December, the leaders of Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Romania and Hungary, they signed an agreement in Bucharest to build an underwater electric cable to transmit the electricity produced in Azerbaijan and Georgia to European markets. And Azerbaijan actually has taken an ambitious role in changing its technological ecosystem, meaning modernization them and digitalizing them. So, and obviously it goes without saying that the role of the Ministry of Digital Development and Transport of Azerbaijan is great. So my question is, could you please share with us the Minister's plan and strategy to support the energy transition?
Sure, thank you, Turkhan. And I think, to start from the very beginning, obviously digital transformation, digitalization can greatly enhance the energy transition process. Now, if you capitalize on such technologies as the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, data analytics, the governments can certainly better monitor, manage, and optimize the use of energy. At the same time, if the larger public have better digital skills, have better access to digital services, that can also greatly help to, again, monitor and manage and curtail the unnecessary use of energy. And I think from the perspective of the government, what has been done, what is being done in this respect, well, I think we can talk about it on a few levels, but probably the one thing that I would stress is, in order to achieve digital transformation, we, among other things, need to have proper infrastructure for it. And by proper infrastructure, I mean, in this case, for example, such an infrastructure which can allow both the government and the businesses and the community, the public, have access to high-speed internet. Now, without it, it's hard for me to imagine how we can actually enable digital transformation. That's one of the tenets, that's one of the prerequisites, if you will, of digital transformation. Now, in that respect, the government of Azerbaijan, our ministry, is involved in rolling out the so-called GPON technology. Actually, GPON stands for Gigabit Passive Optic Network. Basically, it's a high-speed broadband fiber optic connection. And the government of Azerbaijan has actually set a goal to provide the entire sort of population of Azerbaijan, all 100% of geographical coverage within Azerbaijan, to high-speed broadband internet service by the end of 2024. Now, obviously, like I said, it's only one of the prerequisites to ensure that we have digital transformation. Among others, I can mention the development of human resources to actually manage this transformation. I can mention such things as cybersecurity, which becomes a paramount importance if you transform your sort of all of the government and all of the businesses from more analog into digital sphere. But all of these things, of course, again, lay on that sort of solid infrastructural foundations which we're taking care of right now.
Thank you, Rashad. Talking about infrastructure, we all know that essentially almost every single international port these days having its own green energy agenda. We also know that Port of Baku in Azerbaijan has also its own green strategy. Could you please elaborate on that? What are the strategies, what are the measurements, what are the steps the Port of Baku is undertaking right now to green its operations?
Thank you for that question. I think the question has already been answered partly because it's all part of the diversification strategy of Azerbaijan that we go about building up other businesses. And the port, in a way, is trying to do this on the logistics front. And we are trying to do it in a way that we optimize the use of resources so that we don't use so much fossil fuel. That's one. Secondly, we have set a target for a very ambitious target of, not ambitious, I think relatively moderate ambitious target, right? By 2035, we have zero emissions strategy. What this does for us, it actually gives us a map of how to approach this strategy. From there, if you look at Azerbaijan as a whole, we are not really industrialized. We are semi-industrialized. As you know, Europe is a very industrialized nation, and China on the other side is industrializing. So we sought help, okay? We sought assistance from EU and other developed countries on how to approach this. So EU has, together with Azerbaijan, developed a carbon footprint map of using green technologies as well as improving our processes. And we hit a milestone in 2019 where we had EcoPort certification. That means our processes are all geared towards minimizing the use of fossil fuel. That's actually the first step. That's actually the easy step. Next step, we are looking at application of some of the technologies that are there. But if you look at it carefully, it's not only new technologies that we embrace. We somehow customize the old technologies as well, okay? Because when we look at all the equipment that I have in the port, we can't overnight sell all the equipment and change it to electric. We can't, that's not possible. Commercially, it's not possible, and in a way, sorry to say, there's no incentive to do it because fuel is cheap here when we do this. But as a means of embarking on a strategy, we do invite players to come in to help us do this. And one of it is a company that provides additive fuel. One of it is the application of hydrogen boosters. And what does this for us is make use of the fossil fuel more efficiently. So we use less, so there's less carbon footprint, and we emit less pollution. The other one is that it enables our equipment, right, to perform more efficiently. Okay, so we kill actually two birds in one stone, that we reduce the carbon footprint and our equipment perform more efficiently. That's on the equipment side. Even on the electrical side, on the electric cranes, okay, that we have now doing the heavy cargo, we actually inbuilt some mechanism inside. It's like a hybrid car, that when it moves heavy cargo, it stores the kinetic energy as potential energy, and then storage in the battery storage, and then it uses this energy to power up ancillary functions of the crane. So overall, it uses less fossil fuel, but remember, because electrical grid is still powered by fossil
But
fuel.
they're not fully electric. They're,
Yeah.
they're hybrid and they
Yeah.
turn
Sort
as
of
they work.
Passive
Yeah.
hydro, but
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
So, and going forward, we are looking at renewables, right? We are talking with some overseas companies to install solar panels on the available space on the rooftops of the warehouses, on the rooftops of the car parks, on rooftops of buildings, to provide renewable energy. And how do we use this renewable energy? First of all, we are thinking of actually electrolysis, meaning that we use electrolysis using the source of renewables, and then getting a byproduct of hydrogen through electrolysis of water, and through the Haber-Bosch process, and through some catalytic process, we produce ammonia that can be used as fertilizer, and we store it in our new fertilizer terminal. So we are talking about a bit of circular economy here, because the water that we use can emit from our storage plant, which is grey water. We can use this, right? That our storage plant actually produces water, industrial water, that can be used for this electrolysis process. So we want to create a circular economy in this. And we are still in the stage of looking for the correct partners, as well as finalizing the details on the technical side. There are many, many more examples I can give using technology to reduce the carbon footprint, but that's where we are now on the port side. Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. I think we're talking about this, complex technology that you're going to apply. And when we talk about technology, I think we immediately think about people who will actually manage those technology. So speaking of orderly, just energy transition, I think the role of people is inevitable here. So, Professor, we were excited to hear that ADA University is considering to launch a degree in renewable energy. Can we hear more about that?
One of the flagship initiatives of IDD University is to partner up with 5 top Italian universities. And we're going to do something that nobody's done before. We're going to host a distinct but ultimately integral part of our university. We're building a campus as we speak. We've started with some programs, and what we've done is we've, as I said, partnered with 5 Italian universities. But this is the first time that they're all working with each other, and they're doing it through us. So one of the programs that we've been thinking about launching and that we're in some kind of an advanced negotiation with is precisely this kind of a degree in sort of renewables, sustainability. And so this, more or less by definition, is going to have to be an interdisciplinary kind of a degree. You take something from a couple of the sciences, you do a little bit of sociology, you do a lot of, engineering and so on. You put it together, you create a bespoke curriculum, unique kind of a degree. Certainly be the first time anything like that would be offered in Azerbaijan. So let's see if it ends up happening. And obviously that's important for the topic that we're talking about, but for the future of this country and other countries. Right? In order to be able to have a qualified workforce, Nobel Energy, Masdar, Aqua Power, all these companies that are looking to make further investments in solar, wind, or whatever, clearly need to have qualified personnel to do this. Now, there are lots of ways that you can do this mid-career, of course, job training, all these things, but at the end of the day, if you can anchor your hiring, or at least your new hires, in by doing the recruiting from a program that's really devoted to what you're going to want to do, then that would be obviously a great benefit. So let's see if it happens.
Well, for me, I think that's really, really good if it takes off, because that's really important for the Azerbaijan as a whole. Because you need to change the mindset of the people. become a country resource rich, we sell fuel, we sell gas, we get revenue. More than 90% of your GDP is that. Our transit cargo only generates only 1 point something percent. So there's a lot more to do in the areas of renewables and diversification. Then why not start with the young people first to carve out the new future for renewables as a means of diversification of the economy, you know? And coming from Singapore, that's when we ingrain all these ideas and ideals in the young from the very start. And then when they grow up, it becomes natural. They will do startups. There'll be entrepreneurships. There'll be startup companies. Then you form a whole new ecosystem there. Without this kind of footing and grounding in the academia side, the startups and entrepreneurship may happen, but with a little push from the academia, it will even be greater strides made there, and it will happen even faster. And the port can partner these entrepreneurs, companies, to give them a startup space in the port to do their innovations in port equipment, for example, right? We have a lot of expansion plans coming in. Even the technologies that you want to do the civil works and to build the bridges and to build the berths, that is also a green element in it, because you can use fly ash from when you produce steel to put it into concrete, and fly ash is actually a waste, to put it in concrete to make green concrete, and then put it into the buildings. So interdisciplinary, that's one example. So I think it's great if this can happen, and ADA can do this.
So if we do end up doing this, and when we start getting some graduates, you're going to do some hiring.
All right, we'll do some hiring. I'll be even doing some lecturing also.
Okay, so we had a good discussion, I think, about specific policies and how various stakeholders at the local level are trying to green and contribute to the green development of Azerbaijan and contribute to the climate targets of the country. Let's zoom out a little bit and talk about the role of the government. And particularly, I think I would be interested in learning what we do in terms of innovations and in terms of green developments in the recently liberated territories of Karabakh. So my question would be to Rashad, to you, about the role of the Ministry of Digital Development and Transport in the Karabakh region.
Sure. I think, again, I'll have to preface that answer with a bit of a context. I think you used the word innovation or technology, and those are very important words. And the reason I say I want to preface it with something is to actually, and partly to dovetail on what my colleagues here have been talking about the need for human resources to drive the transformation, or be it renewable energy, or for that matter, in any field which is fresh and new for the country. And obviously, innovation is that field. In fact, if we refer to a very important document, which was signed by President Ilham Aliyev in February of 2021, which is called Azerbaijan Vision 2030, the socioeconomic priorities for Azerbaijan. And again, I'm sure that you've certainly read it, and there's a couple of important points there. One of them being that Azerbaijan targets by year 2030, obviously it's a visionary statement, so there's no plan, but it's a statement. Azerbaijan targets to build a society which is actually thriving on innovation, right? So in a sense, that the reason I prefaced with that is I'm kind of going back to what my colleagues have been talking about, change of a mindset. Well, to me, that is a signal to the need to change the mindset. Is yes, we have been historically a resource-rich country. We will most likely continue to be a resource-rich country until at least for foreseeable decades, but it doesn't mean that we should, in our minds, continue being sort of narrowed down to that vision of thriving on energy alone, or on fossil energy, let's put it that way, fossil energy alone. So I think, Mr. President, by signing that vision, that statement, already signaled that as a country, as a government, we are moving towards a society which should be driven by innovation. Now, what does it mean in practical terms? In practical terms, it means, well, a number of things. Well, we need to have legislation which enforces, which empowers businesses, small and big, to take a risk, to actually get into that. And again, I can give another example. Last year, literally the 30th of December of 2022, Mr. President signed another very important, I would say even a landmark a law. It was a change to a number of laws which basically allowed companies, both internally in Azerbaijan and basically anybody from outside Azerbaijan, to establish an IT business, specifically dealing with software development. And that law gave them 10-year waiver on all sorts of taxes. It gave them waiver on the need to a quota on immigrant labor, and a number of other things. Again, to me, landslide and literally very, very important a law, which sort of, again, created to me a conducive sort of conditions in Azerbaijan for both local businesses and also businesses that could actually come from outside Azerbaijan to use this as a hub for IT development. Now, the reason I'm using these two examples is to show, and as a government representative, to show that unless you have the right legislation in place, right, you can't really start doing anything on a serious long-term scale, right? Now that you have legislation, and I think we do have at least, I just gave an example of a few things which are geared towards that. The next thing to me is, how do you actually encourage, local community, and Eugene used the word startup community. How do you encourage the local startup community to start getting into that business? And this is where I think I can sort of make a bridge into what can happen in Karabakh. Because we should not just narrow the vision to the government has to deliver everything from A to Z in Karabakh. Obviously, the government has a hugely ambitious plan to revive the region. There's no question about it. Billions of dollars will be committed to this over the coming decades. Again, that's obvious. There's no need to discuss it. However, I think this is a great field for startup community, for younger generation, for external parties, not only for locals, to actually come and use the new technology to, even in a sense, in a good way, experiment with new technology because it's a brand new field, and to try some things for when the country is basically building a lot of things from scratch in those. Literally, cities are built from scratch in those areas. And one such example is actually the so-called concept of a smart city, of a smart village, which again was endorsed by Mr. President a few years back. And the idea is Karabakh becomes a pilot region for smart village, and Baku becomes a pilot city for the smart city concept. And again, for smart city village, going back to Karabakh, I'm sure you've already read in the news the so-called smart village concept in the Aghali village of Zangilan district within Karabakh. That's where the smart village concept is already being tested. And I'm sure it will be tested further in other areas. The key here, and I'm going to round up here, summarize here, the key here is not to just bring any provider, and I'm not going to use sort of brand names, but any provider who claims that they can build a fantastic concept, a great smart village or a great smart city. Because what usually providers do is they try to sell their equipment or sell their technology. The idea is for a government to develop a strategy for smart city or smart village, and then get the vendors to actually submit their proposals, which is in line with the strategy of the government. And this is what the ministry is working on, the smart city and smart village strategy, which will then create a map for vendors, for businesses to come with their proposals and actually then apply it and be there in the real competition with one another.
Thank you. I want to go back to Eugene, to your point, and to hear more about industry-specific actions that in particular your organization is going to do. And it goes without saying that sustainable maritime technologies, that they can make wonders, basically. They can really contribute to the energy transition, and they can actually help lower carbon in the long term. So you've talked a little bit, but can we hear more specifically, what are the port's kind of research and innovation plans as part of their zero emission strategy 2035?
Yes, I went into that in my first part of the speech about using technologies, even existing technologies, combined with our equipment to reduce the carbon footprint. But I want to go further than that, which I've not talked about, for which you have mentioned about registration, right? That's very important, because even though the port is in the forefront of thinking this way, right? The registration is equally important. Just give you an example. We have coal ironing facilities. Coal ironing means that when the ship comes in, it turns off its engine. It's coal. And we create the electricity to provide the energy for the essential functions of the ship when it's alongside. The lighting, the power needed for all the servicing. The engines need to run a bit. You can't just have a coal engine, because the engine will not be very efficient. And we have no takers. Why? Because the vessels are not equipped to do this, right? If there's a registration saying that, look, vessels plying Caspian Sea, or even our national line, shipping line, ASCO, has incentive, given some grants from the government to do this because it will help the environment, then you will see some action there. What happens now is the port uses its own these facilities for its own vessels. Yes, it does reduce the carbon footprint as a start, as an example for the rest to follow. Right? And the other thing is a big thing, trucks actually contribute, a lot besides the vessel. If you look in studies across the globe about ports and the carbon footprint, so-called source of emissions to the atmosphere, about 70–80% comes from the vessels. So that's why carbon footprint, coal ironing is very important. It is done in Europe for cruise vessels. Some ports have this facility and cruise vessels go on this, because cruise vessels use a lot of power when they're alongside. They're like a floating hotel, right? So when engines burn using fossil fuel, they use a lot of power, energy. The other one that is, because we are a transit hub, our volumes on trucks is growing, double digit growing. Trucks from Turkey going to Central Asia, passes through our port. They all emit fumes when they come in, right? So if there's a registration to cater for the latest technologies in trucks to reduce this, I don't know what engines now they are using in Europe, Euro 8, Euro 9, and Europe is going to be taking the policies to have electrified vehicles, even in UK. How this goes to the heavy vehicle, technology will tell, because if it's possible, I think Europe will take the next stage of introducing registration for the trucks as well. Yeah. So the port is, as you know, is a transit area. So all this, when these come in, we need help on the registration to control the flow of this transit equipment contributing to the pollution in the atmosphere. That's one, right? And thirdly, if we're talking about maritime, we are very concerned about the levels in the Caspian Sea now, right? It's dropping due to a number of factors. One is global warming, because evaporation is very high. The other one is through the feedstock. I would call it the feeder. There's a major feeder river feeding the Caspian Sea, and that's the Volga Don, right? So anything that curbs the supply of water from there to the Caspian Sea affects the levels, okay? But it's something we can do which is on the global warming side, right? That is also to do with registration, because if all of us contributes to reducing the carbon footprint, it will reduce the global warming. And we want to take the lead in this so that other ports in the Caspian Sea can also follow. If you talk about the maritime ecosystem, we were the first port in 2019 to get Eco Port certification with the help of EU and OSCE. Then what followed after this, to our delight, was that Kazakhstan also followed. So they also got Eco Port certification. And if there is a knock-on effect, we hope other ports in the region also will follow. So if Azerbaijan can take the lead in this kind of registration to help us reduce the carbon footprint, then other ports in this ecosystem may also follow, and the overall result will be a positive impact to the environment.
All right, thank you, Eugene. Let's go back now again to the regions of Karabakh and Isangezur and look at the region and region's energy, green, smart city developments from an academic angle. And my next question is going to be to you, Damjan. What do you think academia can and maybe should do to support developments, green developments in the region of Karabakh? And maybe any particular example with the ADA University's contribution in that regard?
Well, you know, ADA University is obviously an academic institution. We have this in-house think tank that is obviously well known to all of us, called the Institute for Development and Diplomacy. And these two entities that obviously form part of the same whole have been instrumental, I think, in advancing both research and academic research, but also policy research with regards to a number of the issues that have to do with engendering what Azerbaijan calls the Great Return to Karabakh, right? So, for instance, we were commissioned by the government to conduct a huge survey of refugees and IDPs with 100 questions on figuring out what the mood is and what the priorities are of people who want to go back home. This was not just one of these multiple choice things, but it really did involve a lot of interviews and so on. It was a study that was path-breaking, that was rigorous in terms of methodology, and that was very revealing in terms of the results. And on this basis, it seems to me that the government made a fair amount of public policy decisions with regards to what to prioritize in the context of returns, including a lot of these things that we've been talking about here today: sustainability, smart villages, green technologies, and so on. There was a surprising amount of interest from the sample population, right? So from potential returnees. They more or less by default wanted, since their input was asked, they wanted to have Karabakh be green and sustainable. That's a lovely result. Now, we also publish a number of research papers and policy papers on various topics that have to do with what we're talking about here today. I don't want to get into the specifics of it because it then becomes sort of a list. But I encourage everybody who's watching this to spend time on our website and to read some of these papers. They're organized by section, so if you're interested in anything that has to do with renewing Karabakh, there's a section on that. There's also a section on sustainable development and on energy. And I think that we're one of the few think tanks in Azerbaijan. There are others. But, we're pretty good. We really are one of the few that really takes these kinds of issues seriously. People like to focus on geopolitics. They like to focus on, traditional sources of energy, all these things. I'm one of those people, but at the same time, I recognize the absolute necessity of trying to do the right kind of applicable research for the benefit of, obviously, Azerbaijan, South Caucasus, the whole Silk Road region, and ultimately the world.
Okay, thank you, Damjan. And I think the time is up and the program has come to an end. Thank you, everyone, for participating, for coming. This was Energy Talks. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time.